What up, world? Welcome to this special edition of the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast. This episode will be dedicated to the NFL collusion ruling and how this impacts the common man. I'm your host, Anthony Wright, coming to you from the beautiful and hot as hell confines of Atlantic City, New Jersey. Wherever you may be watching or listening, I thank you as always. Like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel. You can check the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Substack, Patreon, Trovo, and as well as on Podbean. However, for this episode will be seen first exclusively on Substack and then YouTube. So definitely make sure you stay linked in to follow. As always, definitely, and I love you guys. Thank you for plugging in. Like I said, this episode is going to be dedicated to the NFL collusion ruling. Now, this ruling and information came down about 5 or 6 months ago. I want to make sure I give a shout out to Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk and Pablo Torre. Pablo Torre finds out here. You can find him exclusively here on Substack as well as the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast. They did extensive work on this, great deep dive. Mike Florio was banging the drum. Pablo Torre kind of did the deep dive and research and was able to get his hands on the documentation. And boy, oh boy, it's a lot of shit in here to go into that, I took a couple of days to make sure before I did an episode. I didn't want to come up here, half-assed or half-cocked and not really have a full idea of what I'm saying. So I wanted to make sure I did, everything to the nines and then brought this episode to you. But before we get started, I definitely want to make sure we give a couple shout outs to a couple friends of the show. If you're an avid gamer like myself and you're into, gaming, especially summertime, nothing to do, kids home, might have a little bit more extra time than you may have thought you would have had. I implore you, definitely in that downtime, check out Sony PlayStation. There is a link to Sony PlayStation Direct in the description box of this video. Whether you're looking for video games, controllers, remotes, cameras, whatever accessories that you need, they have it there at Sony PlayStation Direct. Don't forget to check it out. Sony PlayStation, more than a game. Looking to get out this weekend, looking to take your spouse out, have a great time with some friends, then look no further than the #1 leading ticket seller and reseller in the world, StubHub. #1 seller in the world for live events, tickets, shows, and concerts, StubHub. All right, guys, so hopping into this episode, like I said, and this information, you can Google this information yourself. There's a lot of different places that had it out there, but I will make sure that the first two guys that did the work, Mike Florio and Pablo Torre, get their credit. But I watched their hour-long interview. I did some reading on my own on this. This is a crazy fucking case. Now, I have covered a bunch of different cases, so far in this year and a half of doing this podcast. The NFL's ruling with, the NFL covering up them doing public relations work for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese in New Orleans during a sex scandal situation. The NFL covering up, and muddying up the water in that whole Sunday ticket ruling. So I've been on a wave of a couple of different things. This collusion case, just fucking insane. Without further ado, like a bit of words, I want to title this episode Collusion-Gate and what was hidden from us and how this affects the common man. There's multiple layers to what has been a very confusing and deliberate task by the NFL to hide information, to make sure that no one knew this information. I mean, there was a 61-page document containing bombshell information that no one knew about. And it's very, very startling. Let's go here first. Let's get to the multiple layers of this. First of all, Deshaun Watson. Obscure name, wondering possibly why. Deshaun Watson is the precursor for all of this happening. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not naive or stupid. Collusion has always been happening in the NFL. It's just now, with Deshaun Watson getting his guaranteed deal, there was ways legally to prove that this shit was happening. For years, the NFL has gotten away with, this is not happening. This is being made up. Take it to their bullshit ass kangaroo court, their arbitrator where they can finagle the books and finagle things the way they want to. And then ultimately things just don't seem to pan out in the player's way that they expect. So That being said, I will not be a fool. This is not the first time that owners have colluded to not give a guy the money he deserves. However, guaranteed contracts has definitely been a sticking point in the NFL for years and an arguing point. And Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns, preferably Jimmy Haslam, giving Deshaun Watson that guaranteed deal kind of opened up Pandora's box. It pissed off NFL owners. A lot of the owners were not happy that Jimmy Haslam did this. They felt like, this was going to cause issues for other quarterbacks who were obviously more deserving than Deshaun Watson. But the startling point of all this was there was a deliberate attempt by the league to ensure that players did not receive guaranteed contracts. Now, if you know anything about labor arbitration, I know about this much. I've done some research myself just to gain some knowledge on this topic. If you know anything about labor relations and labor disputes, typically what it really boils down to is the billionaire, the corporation owner, the business owner, they want to be able to pay people, but they want to pay people as less as possible and get as much, if not more, work done. That's just the name of the game. That's how it works. Not pay you, scraps, but pay you less than what, you're arguing for, so that way they can get the job done at a lesser rate. The thing that's very crazy about this, though, is the NFL argued on national television and in court that they weren't trying to do this, and it was proven. When you read the 61-page document, it says the NFL cites the confidentiality order that applied to the arbitration, but that this doesn't prevent either party from publicizing the outcome of the arbitration, which is hilarious to me because your next thought is, well, why would the NFL Players Association hide this? I mean, I can understand why the NFL would want to hide this, but why would the Players Association not be screaming at the top of their lungs about this? I'll get to that in a second. But this all goes back to a meeting that happened in the spring of essentially 3 years ago now, where Roger Goodell held a meeting with the NFL Management Council, the NFL MC. You'll see their name littered in a lot of these documents about ways to avoid teams guaranteeing so much money to their players. So this is something that the NFL Management Council would discuss. This is something that the players, not the Players Union, excuse me, NFL Management Council discussed and that the commissioner discussed as a way to circumvent giving guys so much money. Make no mistake, during the research on this, I definitely expect there to be labor disputes before, by time, 2031, or is it 2032? It's 2031 when the next CBA is up. I definitely expect there to be labor disputes. The NFL owners want to pay the guys less than 50%. Right now they're splitting the pie 50-50. They want to pay them a little bit less because obviously as the pie grows, the shares grow. And it just seems like to me, greed is afoot. Obviously make the more money the merrier. But it's a situation where the owners and the commissioner are definitely working in cahoots to try to stop this from happening. Now, why is it that this didn't go through or didn't make the noise that it was supposed to? Well, ineffective leadership, in my opinion, and careerism and cronyism. You have a players union president who kind of, it seems like, was looking out for his own interests. You have a shady guy that's brought in as the new Players Association president who has a very scrupulous, very weird background. But ultimately, what led to this problem was the NFL Management Council, who's headed by John Mara, the owner of the Giants, and some league owners basically saying that it would be a weird situation or a crazy situation for him to try to convince other teams how to manage their cap and pay out contracts. But essentially, that's what the NFL Management Council does. They advise other owners and the commissioner on how they want to circumvent certain things that are coming or, on the forefront or on the wave incoming to the league. So not understanding there what his thought process was with that, but that was crazy as shit. And all this information stems from a March 2022 owners meeting. And like I said, Goodell pushed owners to not guarantee contracts, which leads to the NFL Players Association. Because again, the number one startling thing is, well, why was the Players Association not screaming to the top of their lungs about this? The case was resolved in January, so keep this in mind. it says here, and per multiple sources, the arbitrator found that the NFL encouraged teams not to do guaranteed contracts. However, the evidence presented regarding the impact of this approach on the three quarterbacks at the heart of the case, which were Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, and Kyler Murray, wasn't strong enough to trigger damages. I'll get into that too in a second. Now we'll get into the NFLPA and get into J.C. Tretter. Now, J.C. Tretter's situation was very, very unique. Now, for those of you who are the uninitiated or don't know, J.C. Tretter is a former offensive lineman, used to play for the Cleveland Browns, ironically. He actually was a cap casualty because of the Deshaun Watson acquisition. He was one of the guys who wound up losing his job. Now, particular perk to this is you can be NFLPA president, but once you lose your job, whether, because you have to be an active player, once you lose your job, you can no longer be NFLPA president. Dive into that in a bit. While he was NFLPA president, he lost his position when he was cut due to the Deshaun Watson acquisition. Created a very, and I would say, loose and suspect system of voting on how to replace guys and how to improve the players' union. He did an interview with Pat McAfee that kind of was very, very vague and explained things that even McAfee didn't know, and McAfee's well-versed in a lot of those things, like a lot of other people are, and they didn't even know about the process, so suspect right there in itself. It became a situation where essentially J.C. Tretter realized that he wasn't going to be able to get into position, so he needed to get somebody in there that he felt could, I think, in my opinion, as I detail further information, help massage things to where he could be back in position at a later point. Now, that leads me to Lloyd Howe and the suspect voting that you previously heard me mention. Lloyd Howe is the new NFLPA president, who has some very shady and like I said, weird and scrupulous ties to the firm Booz Allen. He's involved in a whistleblower scandal. You'll see that here on the screen, the information from that, dealing with financial impropriety. So be that as it may, he was a Booz Allen CFO from 1988 to 2022. So leaving Booz Allen in 2022, he then gets his NFL job. So kind of weird there. And even with Howe becoming the new president, how that process even played out was very suspicious. NFL players weren't even notified about Howe until the day of the vote came to vote in a new president. So there was no process to be able to vet or to really research, to really dive in and dig in and see who's who or what's what. Just ultimately seemed like a process where someone was put in place ultimately so someone else could get their job back. Continuing further, it says that Howe then creates a new position, which was never heard of ever in the history of the NFL Players Union, an executive level job that never existed called Chief Strategy Officer. Not even a great Gene Upshaw, may he rest in peace, when he was there and head of the Players Union for all those years, didn't have this. So that should go without saying. And the recipient of this new position, J.C. Tretter. As I said, one hand washes the other, both wash the face. Very, very suspicious. Like I said, seems like much of cronyism and just very, 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 very fucked up dealings going on. Shady voting system, players not really being really abreast of knowledge of all that's going on, guys getting knocked out of positions but somehow able to get back. And we wonder why things in this country are fucked up. And we go further into this. And as we go further into this, we go to the arbitrator's ruling. Now, as I previously stated, the arbitrator did find that there was collusion, but however, the collusion didn't trigger damages. Funny enough, though, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Russell Wilson were all looking for those new contracts at the time, as I previously mentioned. They were guys looking for guaranteed deals. The arbitrator ruled from that March 2022 meeting that, quote, mere attendance at the meeting does not mean that the clubs gave adherence to the scheme. That is bullshit right there in itself. That's the arbitrator trying to massage the egos of the owners, you know, to pacify on both sides, you know, splitting the baby. You know, just crazy. I don't even know how you can say that people were in the room, but the scheme didn't happen just because they were in the room. I don't know. I don't know. Going a bit further now with the ruling, the arbitrator's ruling in regards to Lamar Jackson stated only a couple of teams expressed interest in signing him prior to the Ravens' decision to franchise tag him. Now, I need y'all to really think about this, guys. They say there was no collusion going on. You're telling me that apparently no team took a flyer on a guy who was a previous NFL MVP, young, peak of his powers, could come in and help your organization tremendously, like that. You're telling me no one thought of a good idea to try to acquire this guy or trade 2 first-round picks for him or trade the draft capital for him when you know you're not going to find a guy like that in the draft? Suspicious, to say the least. But we're going to go into each individual guy, the quarterback that was going for those guaranteed deals, and how these things are applicable to them and to the case itself. Kyler Murray's agent believed that Kyler was better and more deserving of a long-term deal than Deshaun Watson. He said this in text messages that were exchanged. Now, there was a correspondence, text messages between Michael Bidwell, who's the owner of the Arizona Cardinals, and at the time, the GM, Steve Keim. Michael Bidwell and GM at the time, Steve Keim, confirms that the owner wanted the, quote, contract loaded up with many incentives for him to earn the real money. In English, they wanted Kyler Murray's contract loaded up with a shitload of incentives. So that way, if he does want to earn this money, he's going to have to do a hell of a lot just to even get that much. So, rigged contract, definitely. Now, this was interesting. After Kyler Murray had signed his new deal in July of 2022, court documents show a text message exchange between Bidwell, who's the owner, and the Chargers owner, Dean Spanos. In this conversation, Bidwell confirms in the text that he is happy the deal is done. However, he is really happy about, quote, limiting the guaranteed money. It gets better, girl. Spanos replies that the deal helps them, the Chargers, with, quote, the QB deal that they had to prepare next year. He was talking about the quarterback deal that they had to set up for Justin Herbert the following year in the offseason of 2023. Now, I have to ask you this question, if you guys are really focused in and lasered in, which I hope you are. Why in the hell would the Cardinals owner be excited bragging about his quarterback contract with the Chargers owner, and the Chargers owner is saying that this is great for us, what you did in your organization, because we got a guy coming up and his deal is due? I mean, it's collusion right there in your fucking face. The pure definition of it. But again, the arbitrator and the courts, they play these silly little games. Spanos goes on to reply Bidwell goes on to state, quote, I think many teams will be happy with it once they have a chance to review it. I mean, that confirms the collusion, right there in itself. J.C. Treader also had some unkind words about Russell Wilson. About how, he's some very unsavory words, for lack of better words, to say the least, but that he didn't do what he was needed to do or apply himself, or basically, essentially, he fucked it up for other guys trying to get guaranteed deals because of the way things went with him in Denver. And it's just interesting that J.C. Treader has not come out to reveal those messages, and when all of that information could have been revealed, things were put on the hush. The clamps were placed on it, and this whole subject has been null and void, and it's been 6 months. 6 fucking months. And now all of this stuff is coming to a head and being reviewed and seen now in the down season of the summer. The NFL, of course, with distractions like the moves yesterday with Jalen Ramsey going to the Steelers and, Darren Waller coming out of retirement. There's things to excite the fan base and keep people plugged in and intrigued on different things outside of the fact that the NFL got caught trying to block players from getting guaranteed contracts. Now, I stated in the beginning of this video that how this affects the common man. I've said ad nauseum to anybody that would listen that if they'll block millionaires from getting their wealth, they'll block poor people from getting their couple dollars of crumbs. Looking at this situation, reviewing it in a whole, in a vacuum, you have all these players sacrificing their body, health, life, and limb to go out there to play the game they love and to try to win at a high level. They don't get a depiction or a say-so on where they get drafted. Unlike where I could go and work anywhere where I wanted to work. As long as I'm qualified and I got the skills, I can go anywhere I want to work in this country. Though with a football player, when he goes through college, he has to wait to get drafted. He gets drafted, you get into the NFL, you go through the process. Average NFL career only lasts 4 years. So essentially, the guys who are really elite, there's people that argue, they should get guaranteed contracts. I feel like anybody who plays football, who especially is out there playing and contributing to special teams, backups, whatever, you should get a guaranteed contract. Think of this at your job, because most jobs now aren't unionized. But think about this on your level. You and your colleagues have an opportunity to get better pay, better working conditions, better peace of mind and quality of life at work. And because your union president is a fucking goon and a careerist and worried about self and says and does some things that ultimately aid the argument of the owners or your boss or the corporation that you work for, you're now without. And that's the situation that these players are going through right now. I believe in unions. I know there's corruption everywhere and everything, even the government. But the NFL players will not get what they need unless they have better, strong, effective management. You cannot trust J.C. Tretter or Lloyd Howe. These guys are fucking company men who are just talking heads, trying to prove a point, trying to put more icing on top of their career cake. This is a complete lack of, of trust and a complete failure on the Players Association's part. If they are really a legitimate union, their players should have knowledge of what's going on. And once they do, they need to call an emergency meeting and have these guys make sure they're eliminated and not put in place to run them. Because I just feel like Lloyd Howe is going to give the owners whatever they want. And I feel like J.C. Tretter is going to do whatever he needs to just so that way he can wiggle himself back into that role as NFL Players Union president. But a lot to unpack, a crazy situation. I'll definitely have more updates on this as the off season goes along, as the story goes along. But this is not going away anytime soon. The NFL, though they thought they were going to keep it on the hush for 5 to 6 months with the assistance of the fucking Players Association, it is now known, and questions must be answered regarding this. So we shall see. Don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Thanks. As we get further into the heart of this matter, we've already covered the Lamar Jackson aspect. We've covered the Kyler Murray aspect, and I've touched briefly on Russell Wilson's aspect. Let me dive further into the details on the Russell Wilson aspect of this collusion case. Russell Wilson spoke, obviously, at the hearing in the federal court case regarding this. In the court documents, it shows that he testified, quote, he wanted a 7-year fully guaranteed contract of around $50 million a year. Russ stated that he was under the impression he was getting it by saying, quote, they didn't even blink when discussing contract negotiations. Now, he was sitting down speaking with the Broncos owner and Walmart CEO Greg Penner. And Greg Penner stated that he felt like the deal could get done. Even general manager George Payton felt good about it and stated, quote, and the benchmark it sets versus Watson's contract for the rest of the league. So they were kind of basically, again, in collusion, trying to figure out a counter way on how to set a new benchmark or template for quarterback contracts outside of what Deshaun Watson got. Because if they gave everybody what Deshaun Watson, if the Broncos would have did it, then all the other teams would have to fall in line. So the case is very, very, very much like laid out in front of our face. I mean, you'd have to be fucking, Ray Charles not to see it. They colluded. This was a league-wide thing where they were going all over speaking to all their constituencies, making sure that these guaranteed contracts weren't being handed out. It goes further. Footnote number 25 on page 23 of this document stated as and this was what we all have been kind of speculating as reasons to why the NFL Players Association wouldn't have put this paper out or put this document or been screaming, bloody fucking Mary about it. The NFLPA will want the document suppressed. J.C. Tretter claims, quote in the court documents, that he wouldn't have said and or criticized Mr. Wilson if he had known that the owners had a collusive agreement to limit guaranteed compensation. So, incompetent, ineffective leadership, I definitely think that goes without stating. J.C. Tretter is he makes the players union look weak, very weak in this. And then you got text messages. Again, you heard me allude earlier to the statements he made about Russell Wilson. Text messages exchanged, and in those messages, and we're going back to July 8th of last year, 2024, with DeMaurice Smith, basically, diss Russell Wilson, say that Wilson ruined guaranteed contracts for everyone, quote unquote. Owners used this to say that they weren't colluding. So this all backfired in J.C. Tretter and the Players Union's face. Like I said, Tretter is suspect, and I believe that he is a careerist and can't be trusted. Neither can Lloyd Howe be trusted. And they both, ironically, Tretter and Howe have declined comment on this subject. And the NFL even more can't be trusted when you claim you want to grow your game, but you don't want to grow the payroll of the players because essentially you just don't want to pay the guys what they're worth. Now, again, I've reiterated, these guys are playing with the most violent sport in the world. Head injuries, leg injuries, you can be taken out at any moment. And the fact that you have owners, and I get what some of the argument that people have made, well, they're still going to be making millions of dollars. It's just like at your job. Again, this relation cannot be misconstrued because if the millionaires aren't getting paid, the people at the bottom getting scraps won't get paid. This is how it all works. It's a chain effect. Shit rolls downhill. So this is going to be major because with them proving this on the lower level, this helps the people like ourselves who are trying to prove at our jobs that these companies do little fuck things to ensure that we don't get paid, that we don't reach certain incentives, that you don't reach certain goals. It's all applicable. So very startling news, very revealing. Like I said, as more updates come along, I will definitely post it here on the show and on the channel and discuss it. But yeah, very, very startling case and very revealing. And I hope that more players, now that more players are finding out and the guys want to take action, hopefully they're able to do something about this because they do deserve their money. They do deserve to get guaranteed contracts. And the owners are fucking cheap, for lack of better words. They don't even want to give these guys fucking grass. I mean, they got these guys playing on turf. We should understand the type of assholes that we're dealing with. And again, labor laws are labor laws. Labor discussions and labor discussions, and ultimately, I get it. Their goal is to make more money while spending less, but you're not really growing a healthy game if you're not paying your guys adequately. So we shall see. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Take care, stay cool out there, guys, and enjoy your day. Hey to all my fans and subscribers out in the UK. Looking to get out this weekend, looking to make something of your week, then look no further than the Viagogo, the #2 leading ticket seller in the world for live events, shows, and concerts. Definitely check it out. If you're looking for exclusive tickets, look in the description of my videos on the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast. Take care and enjoy your day.